The tow truck arrived at 7:15 in the morning. 2 security officers, 1 police cruiser, and a homeless man who refused to leave the Veterans Affairs parking lot. Standard removal procedure. Officer Daniels pulled on his gloves and approached the vehicle. Third night, same car, same man, same silence. He ordered the man to step out with his hands visible. The old man complied without resistance. No words, no argument, just slow mechanical movements. Hands raised, steps careful, eyes fixed on the pavement. Daniels had called the tow himself, which meant he had to inventory the vehicle. Procedure required it. He opened the driver's door first. Nothing unusual inside. Empty coffee cup, old road map, broken radio. The passenger side was worse. Fast food wrappers, empty water bottles, torn blanket pushed against the door. He moved to the back seat and stopped. Sitting there, perfectly centered as if someone had just placed it, was a folded American flag. Not the cheap kind sold at gas stations. The real thing. Perfect creases, 13 folds, triangular presentation. And clipped to the blue field, a small white card with gold-embossed text. Arlington National Cemetery. Honors Burial. Section 60. Sergeant First Class Marcus J. Patterson. Killed in action. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. August 14th, 2011. Daniel's hand froze above it. He didn't touch the flag. Didn't move. Behind him, the old man's voice came quiet and broken, saying that was his son. Daniels didn't move. His hand still hovered over the flag, not touching it, not daring to. The air in the parking lot had shifted. What began as a routine homeless removal had become something else entirely. The other security officer, a younger man named Carter, stepped closer. He'd been standing by the cruiser filling out paperwork, but his pen had stopped moving. He asked what was going on. Daniels turned slowly, his face pale. He explained what he'd found. A burial flag from Arlington. The old man stood beside the police cruiser with his hands still raised. His shoulders sagged under an invisible weight that had nothing to do with his age. Carter glanced at the Chevy, then back at the man. He asked for a name. The old man didn't answer right away. His jaw worked silently, as if the words were too heavy to lift. Finally, he gave his name. Patterson William Patterson. Daniels closed the back door carefully, gently, like he was handling something sacred. He asked if the name on the card was his son. William nodded once. Sharp. Military. He confirmed it was Sergeant First Class Marcus Patterson, killed in action on August 14th, 2011, in Helmand Province. The date hung in the air between them. Carter lowered his radio. The call to dispatch could wait. He asked why Patterson was sleeping in his car at the VA. William's eyes dropped to the pavement. His voice barely carried over the morning breeze. He explained it was the only place he could still feel close to his son. Daniels exchanged a glance with Carter. This wasn't protocol anymore. This was something else. Daniels mentioned that the VA had services. Housing assistance. Counseling. Patterson didn't have to live in his car. William shook his head slowly. He'd tried the services. They didn't understand. None of them understood. Carter asked what they didn't understand. William looked up for the first time. His eyes were red, hollow, aged beyond his years. He said they didn't understand that he should have been the one who died, not his son. The words landed like a physical blow. Daniels felt his chest tighten. Carter took a step back. Neither man knew what to say. The tow truck driver, who'd been waiting by his vehicle, suddenly found something very interesting to look at on his clipboard. Daniels recovered first. He asked Patterson to sit down. Not in the cruiser, just on the curb. Patterson moved slowly and lowered himself onto the concrete. His joints cracked audibly. He'd been sleeping in that car for 3 nights, maybe longer. His back had to be killing him. Daniels crouched down beside him, not towering over him, not using authority. Just one man talking to another. He explained they couldn't let him stay in the parking lot. It was against regulations. But maybe they could work something out. Maybe they could get him inside. Talk to someone who could help. William stared at the pavement between his feet. He'd heard it all before. Regulations. Protocols. Systems designed to help that never actually did. He asked if Daniels had children. The question caught Daniels off guard. He admitted he had a daughter, 7 years old. William nodded slowly. He said Daniels couldn't understand then. Couldn't understand what it was like to bury your own child, to fold a flag that should have been yours, to stand at a grave that has the wrong name on it. Daniels didn't have an answer for that. He glanced up at Carter, who looked equally lost. The morning sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Cars were starting to arrive. Veterans coming in for appointments, staff reporting for their shifts. And here they were, 3 men standing around a rusted Chevy, talking about death and loss and things that couldn't be fixed. Carter broke the silence. He suggested they call the VA crisis team. Someone trained for this, someone who knew how to handle it. Daniels agreed. He stood and walked toward his vehicle to make the call. William didn't move, didn't try to run, didn't protest. He just sat there, staring at nothing, lost in a grief so deep it had become a physical presence. While Daniels made the call, Carter stayed with William. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Just stood there. Present. A witness to suffering he couldn't comprehend. After a few moments, William spoke again. Quieter this time. Almost to himself. He said Marcus was a good kid. Best in his class. Could have done anything. But he chose service. Chose to deploy. Chose to go where he was needed most. Carter listened. He asked what happened in Afghanistan. William's jaw tightened. He explained that most of it was still classified, but what wasn't classified was the result. 1 sergeant killed. 5 soldiers wounded. A mission that succeeded at a cost nobody talks about. The way William said it made Carter think there was more to the story, something unsaid, something that haunted the old man every time he closed his eyes. But before he could ask, Daniels returned. The crisis team was on the way. ETA 10 minutes. They'd talk to William, assess the situation, maybe get him into a program. William shook his head. He'd been through programs. Therapy. Support groups. Pills that made him numb without making him better. Nothing worked. Nothing could reach the place where the guilt lived. Daniels asked what he felt guilty about. William looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. He said he was guilty of everything. The statement hung there, unexplained. Before either officer could press further, a dark blue sedan pulled into the lot. Not a standard VA vehicle. Something else. The license plate read, U.S. Government. Exempt. A man stepped out. Late 40s, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that was too nice for a Thursday morning at a VA hospital. He walked directly toward them with purpose, not hurried, but deliberate. Daniel stood straighter. Something about the man's bearing triggered instincts he'd developed over years of law enforcement. This wasn't a crisis counselor. This was something else. The man approached and pulled out a badge. Defense Intelligence Agency, Special Investigations Unit. His name was Collins. He asked which one of them was William Patterson. Daniels pointed to the old man still sitting on the curb. Collins walked over and crouched down beside him. Not aggressive, almost gentle. He told William they'd been looking for him. 3 days, ever since he stopped showing up to his scheduled check-ins. William didn't look surprised. He asked if they were going to arrest him. Collins shook his head. He explained nobody was getting arrested, but they needed to talk. Privately. About Marcus. About what really happened in Helmand Province. About why William felt responsible. That got William's attention. His eyes focused for the first time since they'd found him. He asked how Collins knew about that. Collins stood and offered his hand. He explained there were things William didn't know. Things about that day. Things that had only recently been declassified. Things that might change everything. William stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then slowly, with effort, he took it and stood. Collins looked at Daniels and Carter. He thanked them for their service, but explained this was now a federal matter. He'd take it from here. Daniels started to protest, but Collins cut him off. This was above their pay grade. Above his, too, if he was being honest. But orders were orders. Collins added one more thing. He explained that William had been assigned a DIA caseworker 2 years ago as part of a Valor Award review process. When William stopped checking in 3 days ago, Collins was notified. This wasn't an arrest or detention. It was mandated follow-up for family members involved in posthumous honor upgrades. William walked toward the sedan without being asked. He paused at the Chevy and looked back at the folded flag still sitting in the back seat. Collins noticed. He told William to bring it. Whatever happened next, his son deserved to be part of it. William opened the back door carefully, reverently. He lifted the flag with both hands and held it against his chest. Then he followed Collins to the sedan. Daniels and Carter watched them drive away. The tow truck driver looked confused. He asked if he should still impound the vehicle. Daniels shook his head. He told him to leave it. For now, just leave it. But neither man moved. They stood there in the parking lot as the morning grew warmer and the VA came fully to life around them. Both thinking the same thing. What the hell just happened? And more importantly, what didn't they know about William Patterson and his son? The sedan drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. William sat in the back seat, the folded flag resting on his lap. His hands gripped it tightly, as if letting go would mean losing Marcus all over again. Collins drove with precision, taking turns that didn't lead toward downtown or any government building William recognized. They were heading east, away from the city, toward the rural outskirts where farmland met forest. William finally spoke. He asked where they were going. Collins glanced in the rearview mirror. He explained they were going somewhere private, somewhere they could talk without interruption. William's military instincts kicked in despite the exhaustion. He asked if he was being detained. Collins shook his head. He clarified William wasn't detained. He was protected. There was a difference. The statement raised more questions than it answered, but William didn't press. He was too tired, too numb. Whatever was coming, he'd face it like he'd faced everything else since that terrible phone call in 2011. The call that shattered his world. The call that told him his son was never coming home. They pulled off the main road onto a gravel path. A sign read, Shenandoah Veterans Retreat Center. Private property. The facility looked more like a large cabin than a government building. Wooden construction, wraparound porch, American flag flying at full staff. Collins parked near the entrance and got out. He told William to follow him. Inside, the cabin was simple but well-maintained. Leather furniture, stone fireplace, walls covered with military photographs spanning decades. Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Faces of men and women who'd served, some still living, many not. Collins gestured to a chair near the fireplace. He suggested William sit down. This would take time. William remained standing. He'd spent 3 nights sleeping in a cramped car. Sitting felt wrong somehow. He asked Collins to get to the point. What did the Defense Intelligence Agency want with him? What could possibly be declassified after 13 years that would change anything? Collins pulled out a tablet from his briefcase. He swiped through several documents, each marked with classification stamps. Top secret. Special compartmented information. Eyes only. He found what he was looking for and turned the screen toward William. It was a photograph. Grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Marcus Patterson, in full combat gear, standing beside another soldier. The date stamp read August 13th, 2011. 1 day before he died. William's breath caught. He'd seen official photos from Marcus's deployment. Clean PR shots. Staged portraits. But this was different. This was real. Combat real. Marcus looked tired in the photo. Older than his 26 years. The weight of war visible in his eyes. Collins swiped to the next image. A map. Helmand Province. Red circles marking locations. X marks indicating Taliban positions. And 1 blue star marked Echo 7. The designation meant nothing to William. Collins explained that Echo 7 was the code name for Marcus's final mission. An intelligence-gathering operation that went sideways when local informants turned out to be enemy combatants. William knew some of this already. The official reports had been vague but consistent. His son died protecting his team. Heroic action under fire. Posthumous Silver Star. But Collins said there was more. Things the Army couldn't reveal at the time. Things that were buried under classification because they involved sensitive operations. He swiped again. This time, a document appeared. Mission Debrief. Dated August 20th, 2011. 6 days after Marcus died. William scanned the text, but the military jargon was dense. Collins helped him. He pointed to a specific paragraph. The part that explained what really happened. Marcus's team had been tasked with meeting an informant who claimed to have intelligence on a high-value Taliban target. The meeting location was compromised before they arrived. The informant was already dead, and 20 enemy fighters were waiting in ambush. The team walked into a kill box. Standard procedure would have been immediate exfiltration. Call for air support, extract under covering fire, live to fight another day. But Marcus made a different choice. He saw that the enemy position blocked the only safe route out. If his team tried to retreat, they'd be cut down in the open. So he did something else, something that wasn't in any manual. Collins pulled up another document. Radio transcripts, recovered from Marcus's personal recorder. The device had been returned to William with his son's effects, but it was listed as non-functional, damaged in combat. William had never heard what was on it, until now. Collins pressed play. The audio was scratchy, punctuated by gunfire and shouting, but Marcus's voice came through clear, calm, controlled. He was calling in coordinates for an airstrike. Danger close. Very danger close. Another voice, his team leader, protested. The coordinates Marcus was giving would put ordnance within 50 meters of their position. Unacceptable risk. Marcus overrode him. He insisted it was the only way. The enemy was too entrenched, too numerous. If they didn't break the ambush now, nobody was making it out. The recording continued. Marcus coordinating with air support, adjusting targets, making corrections. His voice never wavered, never panicked, even as the situation deteriorated around him. Then came the sound everyone dreads, the whistle of incoming ordnance, the team leader shouting for everyone to get down. And then nothing. Static silence. The recording ended. Collins turned off the tablet. He gave William a moment. The old man stood motionless, the flag still clutched in his hands. His mind was reeling. He'd known his son died in combat. He'd known it was during an ambush. But he didn't know this. Didn't know that Marcus had called in fire on his own position. Didn't know his son had made the calculation that his life was worth 5 others. William's voice came out hoarse. He asked if the airstrike killed Marcus. Collins shook his head. He explained the ordnance broke the ambush, scattered the enemy, gave the team a chance to retreat. But Marcus was hit during the chaos. Enemy fire. Not friendly. Caught him in the chest as he was moving to cover. He died before the medevac arrived. The distinction didn't make William feel better. His son was still dead. Still buried in Arlington. Still gone. He asked why Collins was telling him this now. Why declassify it after 13 years? What possible purpose could it serve? Collins stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the forest beyond. He explained that the mission Marcus died on wasn't just intelligence gathering. It was part of a larger operation. One that ultimately led to significant tactical victories in Helmand Province. The intelligence his team was trying to gather did exist. And because of Marcus's actions, because he kept his team alive, they were able to retrieve it later. That intelligence saved American lives, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. But there was more. Collins turned back to William. He said the Army had recently completed a comprehensive review of valor awards from the Afghanistan and Iraq campaigns. The process had taken 18 months. Congressional oversight, military review boards, declassification protocols. Many actions had been undervalued. Many soldiers hadn't received proper recognition because operations were classified at the time. Marcus Patterson was one of them. The paperwork was finalized last week. His Silver Star was being upgraded to the Medal of Honor. William's legs finally gave out. He sank into the chair. The flag slipped from his hands and landed on the floor. He didn't pick it up. Couldn't. His entire body was numb. Collins crouched down and retrieved the flag, placing it gently on the side table. He told William that the upgrade ceremony would happen in 3 weeks. At the White House. The president himself would present it, and William, as next of kin, would receive it on Marcus's behalf. The old man shook his head. He said he didn't deserve to accept anything. Didn't deserve to stand in that room. He told Collins what he'd been carrying for 13 years. The guilt that had destroyed him. The reason he couldn't sleep. Couldn't function. Couldn't do anything but sit in a parking lot with his son's burial flag. He explained that he was the one who encouraged Marcus to join the Army, pushed him toward service. William himself had been a Vietnam veteran. 2 tours. Came home broken but proud. He'd raised Marcus on stories of duty and honor, of serving something bigger than yourself. And when Marcus turned 18, William had been there at the recruitment office. Proud as hell, never imagining where it would lead. Collins listened without interrupting. William continued. He said that when Marcus deployed to Afghanistan, William told him to be brave, to do his duty, to never back down. And Marcus had listened, took those words to heart, lived by them, died by them. If William hadn't pushed so hard, if he hadn't romanticized service, maybe Marcus would have chosen a different path. College, business, anything but combat. The guilt had consumed William after the funeral. He couldn't work, couldn't maintain relationships. His wife left him after a year. She told him she couldn't watch him destroy himself. His friends stopped calling. The VA tried to help, but nothing reached him. Because deep down, William believed he'd sent his son to die. That every word of encouragement, every story of valor, every push toward service had been a step toward that ambush in Helmand Province. Collins let the silence hang for a moment. Then he said something that made William look up. He told William that what he was about to show him would change everything he believed about that day. Collins pulled out one more document. A letter. Handwritten. The paper was worn, clearly read many times. He explained that this was found in Marcus's personal effects. Written 2 days before he died. Never mailed. Probably never meant to be mailed. But it was addressed to William. He handed it over. William took it with shaking hands. The handwriting was Marcus, messy but legible. He began to read. The letter explained everything William had been torturing himself over for 13 years. Marcus wrote that he'd chosen service freely, that William's stories hadn't pressured him. They'd inspired him. They'd taught him what mattered, what was worth protecting. He wrote about his team, called them brothers, said he'd die for any of them without hesitation. Not because he was ordered to, but because that's what brothers do. Marcus made it clear. If something happened to him, he didn't want William to feel guilty, didn't want his father to carry that weight. The choice was his alone, made freely, made proudly, made with full knowledge of the cost. The final lines were the hardest. Marcus wrote that if he died, he wanted William to know it wasn't in vain, that every day he served mattered. Every mission had purpose. And if his number came up, if he didn't make it home, he'd face it knowing he lived according to the values his father taught him. Honor, duty, sacrifice. Not because he had to, because he chose to. The letter ended simply. I love you, Dad. Always have. Always will. Don't mourn what I did. Celebrate that I got to do it. William finished reading and set the letter down. His hands were shaking. His vision blurred with tears he'd been holding back for 13 years. Collins didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The letter said everything. After a long moment, William spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. He asked if Collins knew about the letter before today. Collins nodded. He'd read it during the investigation. It was part of why he tracked William down, why he needed to show him the truth. Because William Patterson had been carrying guilt that his son never wanted him to bear. William picked up the burial flag again, held it close. For the first time since Marcus died, something inside him shifted. Not healed, not fixed, but changed. The weight was still there, but it felt different somehow, less like a prison, more like a responsibility, to honor what Marcus chose, to live in a way that justified his son's sacrifice. Collins stood and offered William his hand again. He said the ceremony was in 3 weeks. The White House would provide everything he needed. Transportation, accommodation, support. All William had to do was show up and accept his son's Medal of Honor. Not because William deserved it, but because Marcus did. William looked at the offered hand, then at the flag, then at the letter sitting on the table. And slowly, for the first time in 3 days, 3 months, 3 years, he felt something other than grief. Purpose, direction, a reason to stand up straight. He took Collins's hand and stood. He said he'd be there. At the ceremony. For Marcus. Collins nodded. He told William that was all anyone could ask. But as they prepared to leave, William had one more question. He asked what would happen to his car, to the Chevy he'd been living in. Collins smiled slightly. He explained it was already handled. The VA was having it towed to a proper storage facility, not impounded. Stored. When William was ready, whenever that was, it would be waiting for him. William looked surprised. He asked why the VA would do that. Collins explained that after he'd left with William, Officer Daniels had made some calls, reached out to the right people, made sure everyone understood that William Patterson wasn't just some homeless veteran. He was a Gold Star father. And soon, he'd be the father of a Medal of Honor recipient. That meant something. To everyone. 3 weeks passed differently than the 3 years before them. William Patterson didn't return to his car. Collins arranged temporary housing at a veterans facility outside Richmond. Not a hospital, not a shelter. A residence specifically for Gold Star families attending military ceremonies. The room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a window overlooking a memorial garden. More than he'd had in months. The first few nights, William barely slept. Not from discomfort, but from the absence of it. He'd grown accustomed to the cramped back seat of his Chevy, the constant sounds of the parking lot, the proximity to the VA building where other veterans gathered. Sleeping in an actual bed felt wrong somehow, like he didn't deserve the comfort. But Marcus's letter stayed with him. He read it every morning, every night, sometimes multiple times in between. The words started to sink deeper each time. Your choice. Made freely. Don't mourn what I did. Celebrate that I got to do it. The guilt didn't disappear. Guilt that deep doesn't vanish in 3 weeks. But it began to share space with something else. Understanding. Acceptance. The possibility of peace. Collins visited every few days, always with updates, always with another piece of the puzzle. He brought William a dress uniform. Not new, but restored. William's own uniform from Vietnam. Someone at the Defense Intelligence Agency had tracked it down from storage, cleaned it, pressed it, made sure every ribbon was in the correct position. William would wear it to the ceremony. A father and son, connected through service across generations. Collins also brought photographs, recently declassified images from Marcus's deployment. Not combat photos, nothing graphic, but candid shots. Marcus with his team. Marcus reading a letter from home. Marcus smiling despite the desert heat and constant danger. Images that showed he'd lived, not just served. That he'd found moments of joy even in hell. One photograph stopped William cold. Marcus sitting on the hood of a Humvee, holding a picture in his hands. William recognized it immediately, a family photo from 2005. William, Marcus, and Sarah. Marcus's mother. Before the divorce, before everything fell apart. Marcus was looking at that photo in Afghanistan, carrying it with him, holding on to something worth coming home to. William asked Collins if he could keep that particular photograph. Collins said it was already his. Everything in the file belonged to William now. The military didn't need it anymore. They'd extracted what information they could. The rest was personal, family, memory. The day before the ceremony, Collins arrived with something unexpected. A visitor. Officer Daniels from the VA parking lot. He was out of uniform, wearing civilian clothes, but his bearing was unmistakably law enforcement. He apologized for intruding, but said he wanted to check on William. Make sure he was okay. Make sure he had everything he needed. William was surprised. He thanked Daniels for his concern. Daniels shook his head. He said no thanks were necessary. He explained that after William left with Collins, he'd done some research. Read about Marcus Patterson, about what happened in Helmand Province, about the Silver Star citation. It had affected him, made him think about his own daughter, about the parents who send their children to war and never get them back. He'd needed to see William again, needed to know he was all right. They talked for an hour, not about ceremonies or medals, about loss, about carrying weight that doesn't have a physical form. Daniels shared his own story. His brother had been killed in Iraq in 2006. Not combat, a vehicle accident on base, senseless, preventable. And for years, Daniels blamed the army, blamed the war, blamed everyone except his brother, who'd volunteered knowing the risks. It took time to understand that his brother's choice was his own, that honoring him meant accepting that choice, not resenting it. William listened. He saw himself in Daniel's story. The anger, the blame, the slow journey toward something resembling acceptance. Before Daniels left, he told William that he'd be watching the ceremony. It would be televised on military networks, and he'd be proud to see William standing there, representing every parent who'd lost a child to war, carrying their grief with dignity. That night, William slept without nightmares for the first time in 13 years. The morning of the ceremony arrived cold and clear. November in Washington, D.C. The kind of day where your breath becomes visible and the sky stretches endlessly blue. Collins picked William up at 05:30 hours. Military time. Old habits. The ceremony wasn't until 10:00 hours, but security protocols required early arrival. Background checks. Final verification. Coordination with White House staff. Nothing was left to chance when the president was involved. William wore his restored uniform. 3 ribbons on his chest. Vietnam Service Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Good Conduct Medal, modest decorations, honest service. Nothing extraordinary, but he wore them straight and proper. A soldier again, even if just for one day. The drive to the White House took 40 minutes through early morning traffic. Security checkpoints, identification verification. Background checks that had been completed weeks earlier but were verified again. Standard procedure for entering the most protected building in America. William moved through it all mechanically. His mind was elsewhere. In Helmand Province. In Arlington Cemetery. In the back seat of a Chevy with a folded flag. They entered through the East Wing. A military aide met them. Young Marine. Dress blues, white gloves. He escorted them through corridors William had only seen in photographs. Past portraits of former presidents. Past rooms where history had been made and remade. And finally, into the East Room itself. And what happened in that room would finally give William permission to live again. The East Room was already filled when they arrived. Military brass in dress uniforms. Government officials in dark suits, press photographers positioned at careful angles, their cameras ready but respectfully quiet. And in the front row, a section reserved for families. Gold Star families, parents who'd lost children, spouses who'd lost partners, children who'd lost fathers and mothers. William recognized the expression on their faces, the same one he'd worn for 3 years. Grief dressed in formal clothing, loss wearing its public face. William was seated in the second row, close enough to see everything, far enough to not feel overwhelmed. Collins sat beside him, a steady presence, a reminder that he wasn't facing this alone. Other families arrived in quiet procession. Introductions were made, names exchanged, but everyone understood. Words weren't necessary. They all spoke the same unspoken language, the language of sacrifice. A Gold Star mother sat to William's left. Her son had been killed in Iraq in 2007. She held a photograph in her lap. A young man in army fatigues, smiling, full of life. She caught William looking and showed him the picture. He showed her the photograph Collins had given him, Marcus on the Humvee. They didn't speak, just shared a moment of mutual understanding. 2 parents, 2 children, 2 flags folded the same way. The room grew quieter as 1,000 hours approached. A tension filled the air. Not uncomfortable, but heavy, weighted with the knowledge of why they were all here. At precisely 1,000 hours, a door opened. A voice announced the arrival of the President of the United States. Everyone stood. The room seemed to hold its breath. The President entered, flanked by the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He moved to the podium with practiced ease. Leader of the free world, Commander-in-Chief. The man who sent soldiers to war and welcomed them home. Both liberator and burden. He carried both roles visibly in his posture, strong but not untouched by the weight of it. The President began speaking. His words were careful, measured, but genuine. He talked about valor, about service, about the men and women who stand between peace and chaos. He spoke of Afghanistan, of a war that had lasted longer than most Americans realized, of victories won at terrible cost, of missions that succeeded and missions that didn't, and of the individuals who made it all possible. Soldiers like Sergeant First Class Marcus Patterson. William felt his chest tighten as the President began recounting Marcus's actions. The ambush at Echo 7, the impossible decision to call in danger-close air support, the calm voice on the radio coordinating fire that would rain down within meters of his own position, the sacrifice that saved 5 lives at the cost of 1. The President's voice carried weight. Authority, but also something else. Genuine respect. This wasn't just political theater. The Commander-in-Chief understood what these families had given, what their children had paid. The citation was read aloud by the Secretary of Defense. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty. The words echoed through the East Room. Ancient phrases. Unchanged since the Medal of Honor's creation in 1862. Connected to every recipient who'd come before. A chain of valor stretching back through American history. Washington's Continental Army. The Civil War. 2 world wars. Korea. Vietnam. And now, Afghanistan. William Patterson was called forward. He stood slowly. His legs felt unsteady. Collins's hand briefly touched his shoulder, steadying, encouraging. William walked to the front of the room. The distance felt infinite. Every step was a mile. Every breath was measured. Cameras clicked softly. the press recording history. But William heard none of it. He was focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on not breaking down, on honoring his son the way Marcus deserved. The president met him at the podium, extended his hand. William shook it. The president's grip was firm, solid. He leaned close and spoke quietly. Words meant only for William. He said that Marcus was a hero, that his sacrifice mattered, that every parent in this room understood what William had endured, that the guilt William carried wasn't his to bear, that Marcus had made his choice freely and proudly, and that the nation was grateful, genuinely, deeply grateful. Not just for Marcus's service, but for William's sacrifice too, because parents who send their children to war pay a price that never ends. The medal was brought forward on a velvet cushion. The president lifted it carefully. The Medal of Honor, light blue ribbon, gold star, impossibly heavy for something so small, historic, sacred, earned in blood and sacrifice. The president read the inscription on the back. Valor. He placed it around William's neck. The weight settled against his chest, not uncomfortable, but undeniable. A physical reminder of something that had always been present but invisible, his son's legacy. William's hand moved to touch the medal. His fingers traced the star. And in that moment he felt something he hadn't felt in 13 years. Pride. Not guilt, not shame. Pride. Pride that his son had stood on that wall. Pride that Marcus had made the choice to serve. Pride that when the moment came, his son had been brave, had been selfless, had been everything a soldier should be. The president stepped back and saluted. A full military salute. To William. To Marcus. To every Gold Star family in that room. The Secretary of Defense saluted. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs saluted. And then, one by one, every military member in the East Room came to attention and saluted. Dozens of hands rising in unison. A show of respect that transcended rank and protocol. This was the military honoring its own. Honoring the fallen. Honoring the families left behind. William returned the salute. His hand moved automatically. Muscle memory from Vietnam. From a time when he'd worn the uniform in combat. His hand was steady. His back straight. In that moment, William Patterson wasn't just a broken father. He was a soldier, a veteran, a guardian of his son's memory. He returned to his seat. The ceremony continued. Other families received other honors, other stories of sacrifice, other children who'd given everything. But William heard none of it. He sat holding the medal, feeling its weight, its texture, its meaning. The Gold Star mother beside him reached over and squeezed his hand. No words, just understanding. They were members of a club nobody wants to join. But once you're in, you're never alone. When the ceremony ended, people approached. Generals with decades of service, senators who'd voted to send troops to war, other Gold Star families who understood the cost in ways no one else could. Everyone offered condolences. Everyone thanked him for his son's service. William accepted it all with quiet grace. But inside, something had fundamentally changed. He wasn't just carrying grief anymore. He was carrying honor, Marcus's honor. And that made all the difference. Collins drove him back to Richmond that afternoon. They rode in silence for most of the trip. Finally, William spoke. He asked what happened next. Collins glanced at him. He explained that the Defense Intelligence Agency's role was finished. William was free to go wherever he wanted, do whatever he needed. The VA had resources if he wanted them: housing, counseling, employment assistance. But the choice was his. William thought about that. Choice. The word Marcus had used in his letter. Your choice. Made freely. He asked Collins about his car. The old Chevy. Collins said it was still in storage, still waiting. William could reclaim it whenever he was ready. 2 days later, William did exactly that. The storage facility was run by the VA clean. Organized. Nothing like an impound lot. His Chevy sat in a covered bay. Washed. Detailed. Someone had taken care of it while he was gone. William opened the back door. The folded flag was still there. But now it had company. The Medal of Honor rested beside it. 2 symbols. One of loss, one of legacy. William drove back to the VA parking lot. Not to sleep. Not to hide. But to remember. He parked in the same spot. Got out. Stood in the cold November air, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel crushing guilt. He felt connection. To Marcus. To every veteran who'd ever served. To everyone who understood what sacrifice meant. But one conversation in that parking lot would complete what the ceremony had started. Officer Daniels found him there an hour later. He was making his rounds. Recognized the Chevy immediately. He approached cautiously. Asked if everything was okay. William turned to him. Really looked at him for the first time. And smiled. Small, but genuine. He said everything was okay. Not perfect. Not healed. But okay. Daniels asked if William needed anything. William shook his head. He explained he just needed to be here for a moment. To remember. To connect. Daniels understood. He told William that the VA had opened a new wing last week. Long-term housing for veterans. Affordable. Supportive. No one would be sleeping in their cars anymore. Not if they didn't want to. William thanked him, said he'd look into it. Before Daniels left, he asked about the ceremony, how it went. William reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph, the one of Marcus holding the family picture in Afghanistan. He showed it to Daniels, explained what it meant, that Marcus had carried home with him even in the worst moments, that love had sustained him through the war, that the connection between father and son had never broken, even when William thought it had. Daniels studied the photograph carefully, then looked up at William. He said William's son loved him, that it was clear that everything Marcus did, he did knowing his father would be proud. And he was right. William was proud? Finally, after 13 years, he could say that without the guilt crushing him. William nodded. He knew that now. Finally understood it. Marcus had made his choice not because of pressure, but because of love. Love for his father. Love for his country. Love for his brothers in arms. And that love had been worth everything, even the ultimate cost. Daniels walked back to his patrol vehicle. William stood by his car for another hour, watching veterans come and go, some walking confidently, some struggling, all carrying their own weights, their own stories, their own sacrifices. He saw himself in every one of them, and for the first time, he saw possibility. The possibility of moving forward. Not moving on. Moving forward. with Marcus's memory, with Marcus's honor, with Marcus's choice. As the sun set over the VA parking lot, William got back in his Chevy. But he didn't lie down in the back seat. He sat in the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove toward the new veterans' housing facility, toward a future that included grief but wasn't defined by it, toward a life that honored his son not through suffering, but through living. The folded flag remained in the back seat, the Medal of Honor beside it. Constant reminders, not of what was lost, but of what was given freely. Proudly, with full knowledge of the cost. And William Patterson, Gold Star father, Vietnam veteran, and guardian of his son's legacy, finally began to understand what Marcus had tried to tell him. That sacrifice creates meaning. That choice creates honor. And that love transcends even death. 3 years of living in a car. 3 weeks of transformation. One ceremony that changed everything. Not because it erased the pain, but because it gave the pain purpose. And sometimes that's all a broken heart needs. Not healing. Purpose.